Dalton Schultz, who again is another tight end who's seen his ADP drop quite a bit before it's picking slightly back up now. That's RotoViz's ADP tracker, which you can see on their site, and he's at 135 on Underdog, going 22 picks higher on Sleeper at 113. Last year, he was the tight end 11 in points per game. It's 7 top 12 weekly finishes, but it still felt like a bit of a backward step from the previous year when he'd come from nowhere and he was that late round tight end that you really wanted who'd cost you nothing. Whereas last year, the hope seemed to be hoping that he'd kind of break out. Do you think in this Texans offense, which is kind of an offshoot of a Shanahan offense, which we've seen feature tight ends, do you think that Schultz could get featured, or do you feel like he's just going to revert back to, middling tight end who could fringe be a top 12 tight end maybe?
I think he's very likely to have top 10 targets at the position. I don't think Dalton Schultz, the playmaker, is all that intriguing. And I think that the Texans offense will not get to the red zone very often. But to me, the number one stat that carries over year, and it sounds crazy, is just fantasy points per game last year. And he's being ranked well after where he's finished. I know he changed the offense, but going from Dak Prescott down to CJ Stroud, certainly a downgrade. But also the Texans wide receiver group is among the worst in the league. So I think Dalton Schultz is going to play a lot. I think he's going to get a lot of check down targets. I think that CJ Stroud could throw the ball around, and they have checked it down to Dalton Schultz a couple times in this preseason already. So I've been drafting him. But the reason why I've been drafting him, most importantly, is because the tier of players that are around him just seems awful. Like all the wide receivers and running backs, I'm like, I don't want any of these other dudes. And a lot of the times, Dalton Schultz would be like my first tight end, and then I'll draft like the Luke Musgrave and kind of like the upside guys, knowing that I think I'm going to get a tight end 8 to tight end 14 season out of Schultz, and then I'll find another guy that has at least a chance to kind of break out into that top 5 discussion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, particularly on Underdog where it's the 18 rounds. Like, I've been doing a bunch of drafts over there, co-drafted with my friend Joe, and I just find like Dalton Schultz is the last tight end where I like, okay, if I'm going with a 2 tight end build, can I get away with Schultz being one of them? And it's a very easy click because the wide receivers, you're talking like the Allen Lazard, Juju Smith-Schuster range. You're talking about running backs like Jamal Williams, who, much as we loved him last year, it gets messy. There's an awful lot of other running backs who aren't particularly pretty. So, yeah, I'll keep drafting Dalton Schultz, but if you were projecting how the target share is going to kind of be distributed amongst the Texans, do you think that Schultz can be top 2 within that, or do you feel like he can fall out of that? Because there's definitely not anyone with real experience outside of Nico Collins and Robert Woods.
I think it'd be Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, and Robert Woods having very similar target shares. And obviously Nico Collins will have all the air yards of those 3. But yeah, I can see Schultz being like 18% targets, which is like in line with like borderline tight end 1 usage. The touchdown odds are very low though. So I think maybe more of a full PPR kind of late round tight end option, punt off the position, make sure you win the flex with good wide receivers and running backs. And I think that he could get you by, especially if your last round pick is somebody with a little bit more upside. So I think we should know who Dalton Schultz was. And the NFL told us that because he signed for like $6 million this year, which is like fine, but nothing groundbreaking, like nowhere near like the franchise tag or anything like that. So I think he's a catch and fall, reliable guy, probably a perfect fit for this offense because he knows a lot of ball and they ask their tight ends to do a whole lot, and also a perfect fit for CJ Stroud. But the offense is just not going to be very good. So he's going to be fine.